Todd Maisch from the Illinois Chamber would like to now give some testimony. Is your position still the same, no position, or has it changed?
Trying to be positive, constructive. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I do appreciate that. Yeah, we don't usually try and explain our neutral position. I will just be very blunt and say that we think that this is an incredibly important issue. We're out there. We have proposed our own legislation, thanks to the leadership of Representative Thipetti here and Senator Sandoval in the Senate, that we think is better than the product we have here for a lot of reasons. And the most important thing I wanted to say, though, is that yeah, the process needs to go. And we have actually been very encouraged by the bipartisan discussion that have been going, that have been constructive, and the movement of this bill seems to be premature. There are an awful lot of issues to be worked through, and I think that a bipartisan approach has been what is passed subsequent or previous capital bills. I think everybody would like to see as much as a bipartisanship and support for our transportation infrastructure as we can, and that's what we hope we'll go ahead and continue to do. But let me go ahead and say, the reason we can endorse this, there are some really significant policy differences between the legislation. We have the same goal, I believe, Mark, get to the finish line, but there are some serious policy decisions we've got to go ahead and get through before we get there at the end of the day. Sales tax came up. We think this is the opportunity to finally make Illinois one of the very, very few states, or the vast majority of states, who don't put the sales tax on motor fuel. My wife lives in Quincy, and I know that when gas is at $3.50, everybody drives across the river to buy in Missouri. A lot of that is because of the sales tax. It is an escalator to price increases. We think it's terrible tax policy because it's not only a tax on the motor fuel, it's a tax on the federal and state tax as well. It's the last tax that goes on, so it's a tax on a tax on a tax. We think that should be addressed right up front. We know there's a GRF impact. We've had discussions with the administration just yesterday about backfill on how we could go ahead and do that in a constructive way, but sales tax has to be addressed now. We need to take this opportunity and get that done. Let me go ahead and talk about bonding as well. Very good discussion. I don't disagree with Mark, except that we've got a little problem on bonding. We think it does need to be addressed up front. That is how you're going to address bridges. Almost every week, unfortunately, we're having a story on the front page of the Tribune about bridges crumbling. We've got to get an injection of funding into those bridges, but we've got a problem here. There's a discussion about this cap on 8% of GRF being dedicated to bonding, and you can't go beyond that. So if you simply don't address that issue up front in the bill, you create a real possibility of people to say, we can't bond because we hit our 8%. So if you want an infusion into bridges, you want to address that issue and make sure there's adequate bonding, you've got to address it up front. Our bill does that as well. Indexing registrations, the tollway, I think there's a real opportunity to go ahead and get that, make the projects larger. If you go ahead and address the issue of dedicated lanes on I-55, wherever you like, we think that that is important as well. The new civil rights penalties is something that may very well be of great concern to the business community, as we already have a Human Rights Act. We worked on a bipartisan basis to reform that system to make it work better for everybody, simply create a new set of penalties. We've got to go ahead and study that. So there's an awful lot of work that still needs to be done. Now, surprisingly, we think our approach is closer to where we need to be, but we think that bipartisan discussion continuing between now and when passage comes about is the way to go, and we hope that that is what happens. Thank you.
Okay, and from the chamber's standpoint, are there some concerns with that indexing? And
yeah, the indexing we've heard. So it was a conversation. I will follow up, and I'm an expert on all 50 states indexing. All I had to know is I had a conversation with the Trucking Association yesterday, and they contended that we would be the only state in the nation that index truck registrations. We do that. So that's not on our favorite list. We know there are things that are going to have to be on the table that we're not really fond of, but that's one that right now we're very concerned about.
Yeah, and
That's a new provision we've not heard of. Discrimination is already a crime. We already have lots of laws on the books and an apparatus, so we'll just want to go ahead and take a look at that and make sure.
That's why I
it's
was wondering
consistent.